Braille class. Today we're going to be reading another part of Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. Remember, in the last part of the story, we found out about the Oompa Loompa, how young he becomes. So every time you take one of those Wonka bites, you get 20 years younger. You could take more than one. But remember, Willy Wonka had said you can't take too many. He will tell you how many you can take. And we were looking at the recipe, so we're going to start from there. What ingredients are in the Wonka bites, because Grandma Georgina wanted to have a little look. Take a block of finest chocolate weighing 1 ton or 20 sackfuls of broken chocolate, whichever is the easier. Place chocolate in very large cauldron and melt over a red hot furnace. When melted, lower the heat slightly so as not to burn the chocolate, but keep it boiling. Now add the following in precisely the order given. So that means in the order you have to do it exactly how it's set out. So you can't just put in the eggs before the flour. If you were baking a cake, you'd have to put in the flour first, if it's said to do that. Stirring well all the time and allowing each item to dissolve before adding the next. Here we go. Oh, it's a full page worth. The hoof of a manticore, the trunk and the suitcase of an elephant, the yolks of 3 eggs from a whiffle bird, a wart from a warthog, the horn of a cow, it must be a loud horn, the front tail of a cockatrice, 6 ounces of sponge from a young slime scraper, 2 hares and 1 rabbit from the head of a hippocampus, the beak of a red-breasted wilbatross, a corn from the toe of a unicorn, the 4 tentacles of a quadrupus, the hip and the poe and the pot of a hippopotamus, the snout of a proghopper, a mole from a mole, the hide and the seek of a spotted wangdoodle, the whites of 12 eggs from a tree squeak, the 3 feet of a snoswanger, you can't get 3 feet, 1 yard will do, the square root of a South American abacus, the fangs of a viper, it must be a windscreen viper, the chest and the drawers of a wild grout. What strange things to have in a recipe. I've not heard of any of those things. When all of the above are thoroughly dissolved, boil for a further 27 days, but do not stir. Really important. At the end of this time, all liquid will have evaporated and there will be left in the bottom of the cauldron only a hard brown lump about the size of a football. Break this open with a hammer, and in the very centre of it, you will find a small round pill. This pill is Wonkabite. So it's a very, very long process to make those pills. So no wonder Mr. Willy Wonka is saying how amazing these pills are and how expensive they are, because it takes such a long process to be able to make them. Chapter 15, Goodbye Georgina. When Mr. Wonka had finished reading the recipe, he carefully folded the paper and put it back into his pocket. A very, very complicated mixture, he said. So can you wonder it took me so long to get it just right? He held the bottle up high and gave it a little shake, and the pills rattled loudly inside it like glass beads. Now, sir, he said, offering the bottle first to Grandpa George, will you take 1 pill or 2? Will you solemnly swear, said Grandpa George, that it will do what you say it will and nothing else? Mr. Wonka placed his free hand on his heart. I swear it, he said. Charlie edged forward. Grandpa Joe came with him. The 2 of them always stayed close together. Please excuse me for asking, Charlie said, but are you really absolutely sure you've got it quite right? Whatever makes you ask a funny question like that, said Mr. Wonka. I was thinking of the gum you gave to Violet Beauregard, Charlie said. So that's what's bothering you, cried Mr. Wonka. But don't you understand, my dear boy, that I never did give that gum to Violet? She snatched it without permission. And I shouted, stop, don't, spit it out. But the silly girl took no notice of me. Now Wonkabite is altogether different. I am offering these pills to your grandparents. I am recommending them. And when taken accordingly to my instructions, they're as safe as sugar candy. Of course they are, cried Mr. Bucket. What are you waiting for, all of you? An extraordinary change had come over Mr. Bucket since he had entered the chocolate room. Normally, he was a pretty timid sort of person. A lifetime devoted to screwing caps onto the tops of toothpaste tubes in a toothpaste factory had turned him into a rather shy and quiet man. But the sight of the marvellous chocolate factory had made his spirits soar. What is more, this business of the pills seemed to have given him a terrific kick. Listen, he cried, going up to the edge of the bed. Mr. Wonka's offering you a new life. Grab it while you can. It's a delicious sensation, Mr. Wonka said, and it's very quick. You lose a year a second. Exactly 1 year falls away from you every second that goes by. He stepped forward and placed a bottle of pills gently in the middle of the bed. So here you are, my dears, he said. Help yourselves. Come on, cried all the Oompa Loompas together. Come on, old friends, and do what's right. Come make your lives as bright as bright. Just take a dose of this delight, this heavenly magic dynamite. You can't go wrong, you must go right. It's Willy Wonka's Wonkavite. This was too much for the old people in the bed. All 3 of them made a dive for the bottle. 6 scrawny hands shot out and started scrabbling to get hold of it. Grandma Georgina got it. She gave a grunt of triumph and unscrewed the cap and tipped all the little brilliant yellow pills onto the blanket on her lap. She cupped her hands around them so the others couldn't reach out and snatch them. All right, she shouted excitedly, counting them quickly. There's 12 pills here. That's 6 for me and 3 each for you. Hey, that's not fair, shrilled Grandma Josephine. It's 4 for each of us. 4 each is right, cried Grandpa George. Come on, Georgina, hand over my share. Mr. Wonka shrugged his shoulders and turned his back on them. He hated squabbles. He hated it when people got grabby and selfish. Let them fight it out among themselves, he thought, and he walked away. He walked slowly down towards the chocolate waterfall. It was an unhappy truth, he told himself, that nearly all people in the world behave badly when there is something really big at stake. Money is the thing they fight over most, but these pills were bigger than money. They could do things for you no amount of money could ever do. They were worth at least $1 million a pill. He knew plenty of very rich men who would gladly pay that much in order to become 20 years younger. He reached the riverbank below the waterfall. As you can see in the picture there he is. See the waterfall and then Mr. Wonka. And he stood there gazing at the great gush and splash of melted chocolate pouring down. He had hoped the noise of the waterfall would drown the arguing voices of the old grandparents in the bed, but it didn't. Even with his back to them, he still couldn't help hearing most of what they were saying. I got them first, Grandma Georgina was shouting, so they're mine to share out. Oh no, they're not, shrilled Grandma Josephine. He didn't give them to you, he gave them to all 3 of us. I want my share and no one's going to stop me getting it, yelled Grandpa George. Come on, woman, hand them over. Then came the voice of Grandpa Joe, cutting in sternly through the rabble. Stop this at once, he ordered. All 3 of you, you're behaving like savages. You keep out of this, Joe, and mind your own business, said Grandma Josephine. Now you be careful, Josie, Grandpa Joe went on. 4 is too many for one person anyway. That's right, Charlie said. Please, Grandma, why don't you just take 1 or 2 each like Mr. Wonka said, and that'll leave some for Grandpa Joe and Mother and Father. Yes, cried Mr. Bucket. I'd love one. Oh, wouldn't it be wonderful, said Mrs. Bucket, to be 20 years younger and not have aching feet anymore. Couldn't you spare just 1 for each of us, Mother? I'm afraid not, said Grandma Josephine. These pills are specially reserved for us 3 in the bed. Mr. Wonka said so. I want my share, shouted Grandpa George. Come on, Georgina, dish them out. Hey, let me go, you brute, cried Grandma Georgina. You're hurting me. Ow! All right. I'll share them out if you'll stop twisting my arm. That's better. Here's 4 for Josephine, and 4 for George, and 4 for me. Good, said Grandpa George. Now who's got some water? Without looking around, Mr. Wonka knew that 3 Oompa Loompas would be running to the bed with 3 glasses of water. Oompa Loompas were always ready to help. There was a brief pause, and then, well, here goes, cried Grandpa George. Young and beautiful, that's what I'll be, shouted Grandma Josephine. Farewell, old age, cried Grandma Georgina. All together now, down the hatch. Then there was silence. Mr. Wonka was itching to turn around and look, but he forced himself to wait. Out of the corner of one eye, he could see a group of Oompa Loompas, all motionless, their eyes fixed intently in the direction in the big bed over by the elevator. Then Charlie's voice broke the silence. Wow, he was shouting. Just look at that. It's incredible. I can't believe it, Grandpa Joe was yelling. They're getting younger and younger. They really are. Just look at Grandpa George's hair. I hope you enjoyed story time this week, and we're going to read a little bit more of the story and hopefully finish it next week.